Let's find out what happens now down in the mud. Here I am with the string, said Miss Mud, returning to the ooze with one end of a fishing line in her mouth. I've got quite a long piece of it. Will it do you think? Yes, said the mouse child, and now I must have silence, so I can work out mouses much and little. Far above him, the sunlight drowsed on the water. The shadows flickered in the leaves, and the song of the cicadas vibrated on the warm air like the sound of summer's clockwork running down. Hours passed, and it was midday when Miss Mud's ugly little face appeared. Oh, it's mean. Ugly little face appeared among the reeds and the lily pads where the nutshell drum still floated quietly by the edge of the pond. She clung tiredly to the reed stem she had climbed, a length of fishing line hanging straight down from her jaws into the water. In what seemed the last of her strength, she hauled up the end of the line with good luck coin attached. She ate up the algae that had covered it and scrubbed it well as she was able. Now, although it was not bright, the brass was capable of glimmering in the water, and she hoped it would suffice. You will succeed. Your lucky day is, said the alternating legends as the coin twisted on its string. Dragging it onto the lily pad, Miss Mud left it there among the loose coils of line, then climbed down the reed stem and disappeared below the surface. In an hour or so she reappeared, more line in her jaws, on the rocks near the bank, where a row of painted turtles lay basking in the sun. Risking her life as she passed each turtle, Miss Mud crept stealthily on until she came to a flat rock overhung by the low branches of the sumac on the bank. Here she dragged the line through the narrow fork in one of the branches, and staggered on across lily pads to where the nutshell drum was still rocked in the ripples among the reeds. Working more and more slowly, she tied the end of the line to the strap of the drum. Then she took the end of the line coiled on the lily pad, tied it also to the drum strap, and pushed the coin into the water. The nutshell drum went under, then bobbed up again. Peering down through the water, Miss Mud saw the coin swinging below her, its worn brass gleaming faintly like a forlorn hope. There, she said, that's it. And she collapsed, exhausted, on the lily pad. I feel so odd, she said. I can scarcely catch my breath, and my eyes are growing dim. Perhaps I'm dying, and my little muddy life is finished, and I was never meant to be anything more than what I was. Miss Mud began to cry, and as her body heaved, it split down the back. Oh, she said, and she felt her life stir in her wet and wrinkled wings that were already stiffening for flight. It was so difficult, to be sure, she sighed. She climbed out of the empty, muddy shell of her discarded self, a dragonfly now, new and lovely, emerald green. She waited patiently until the sun had dried her iridescent wings, then launched herself uncertainly to fly. Her shabby nymphhood crouched forgotten on the lily pad, her old name was forgotten too, and all that lay below the surface in the dark. Glittering above the pond, she flew away, sitting, lilting on the warm wind like a song in the sunlight, like a sigh in the summer air. In the mud at the bottom of the lake, Mouse and his child waited. The end of Muskrat's string, still tied to the father's arm, was now knotted to the fishing line that hung swaying in a slack curve up to the surface and the forked branch above the flat rock. Waiting, said the child. How much of our time have we spent waiting? Whoa. Serpentina awoke, yawned, and snapped his jaws hungrily. One arises fresh, he said, to new investigations of to be. What have you found beyond the farther side of nothing? A way out, replied the mouse child. Indeed, said Serpentina. Have you paused to consider that there is no way out? Each way out of one situation necessarily brings the way to another situation. We may say that. Stop! Pay attention. But the mouse and his child, exploding from a cloud of mud, were halfway up to the sunlit surface of the pond. Above them, the nutshell drum went slanting down onto the water. The bass that had swallowed the coin was off like a bullet, and the line cut a V-shaped wake through the water as it ran smoking over the forked branch and hauled up the long-submerged tin mice. Sodden and heavy with the silt at the bottom, they broke the surface, burst splashing into the sunlight, and went skittering across the turtle rocks. Summer people, hissed the turtles, and plopped into the water in rapid-fire order. Father and son banged into the narrow fork in the branch, the knot that tied Muskrat's string to the fishing line slipped out, and they dropped with a soggy rattle to the flat stone by the bank. The mouse child lay in the puddle on the stone as the water drained out of them. They were spotted, streaked, and pitted with rust at all their joints, and their arms as they stretched out to each other were naked, rusty wires. What fur remained was black with rot and green with moss and algae. Their tattered ears stood bent and crooked on their heads, their whiskers hung in limp dejection. The sunlight seemed intolerably bright, and its warmth on their tin was delightful. Sounds were needle-sharp and clear. They listened to the rustling of the leaves, the drone of the cicadas, the slow sweet notes of the white-throated sparrow. And a strange loud sound came from the marshes that bordered the pond. Oong bonk choo! And it went pumping and thumping in the reeds. oong bonk choong, in a steady rhythm. In a nearby birch tree, high above them, a kingfisher watched curiously. In his claws he held a coil of fishing line, one end of which hung straight down into the water. The pounding in the marsh stopped as the child's little tin voice rang out over the pond. "What shall we do now?" he said. "Leave quickly, I hope," said a sepulchral voice from the reeds nearby. The father, who lay facing the sound, saw that the speaker was a heavy-set brown wading bird, streaked out and molted in such ways that he stood motionless. He was almost invisible among the reeds. He stood like a reed too, his long beak pointing straight up, his eyes, however, set very close together like a little pair of yellow spectacles. He stared straight ahead, glassily at the mouse father. "Who are you?" said the father, staring back at the bird, who seemed to come and go like an optical illusion. "One who loves privacy," replied the bittern. "Let that suffice. Our acquaintance need to go no further. Do not let me detain you. Goodbye." The wind stirred the reeds, and he swayed with them, maintaining his invisibility. "If you would help us," the child began. "On your way, I should be delighted," said the bittern. "How may I assist your departure?" "Turn the key in my back and wind us up, please," said the father. The bittern left the reeds and waded sulkingly to the stone, as if begrudging the privacy he lost with every step. Holding the father firmly in place with one large foot, he took a strong grip on the key in his beak. His little eyes bulged alarmingly as he strained at it, and his neck twisted halfway around, but not the key. "What sort of hoax is this?" he said. "Your key won't turn." "We're a little rusty," said the father. "Please try again." The bittern braced himself once more, took a fresh grip on the key, and grunted heavily as it began to turn. The cogs clicked as the rusty spring tightened inside the father, and he waited for the familiar feeling of release that always followed it. The bittern stood them on their feet and let go of the key. Nothing happened. The father's legs did not move. "What's the matter, Papa?" said the child. "Why aren't we moving?" "We're broken," said the father, hurt as much by the dreaded word as the painful tightness of the spring inside him. "Goodbye," said the bittern. "Don't stop to thank me," and he vanished among the reeds. "Broken," replied the child, too shocked to cry. "Broken," replied the father. "We have survived bank robbery, war, the cause of arts, and breaking out of this dam, and contemplating infinity, only to come to this." "Perhaps you still have too much of the pond inside your clockwork," said the child. "Perhaps we've dried out a little." "Drying out won't be enough," said the father. "I can feel that it's more serious than that. Muskrat is our only hope now. But how can we get him?" "Oh, nuts. But how can we get to him?" "Extra!" screamed a familiar voice above them, and the blue jay flashed into view. "I'm so sorry, Christy." "Muskrat killed by a falling tree. Meets death in Beaver Dam reconstruction project. Last words, what divided by how equals y. Diving beetles rout backswimmers in water polo. Tadpoles hit bottom in Little League standings." He looked down, nodded a greeting, shouted, "Wind-ups idle," and flew away. "Look out!" yelled the kingfisher from the birch tree. "Lunchtime!" shrieked a third and harsher voice. A shadow fell upon the mouse and his child, and they felt the sudden sharp grip of powerful claws. The whole pond, the trees around it, and the marsh all dropped away below. A very small drow grew small and tilted out of sight as father and son rose up into the air in the talons of a marsh hawk. "Kill!" sang the hawk with great good cheer. His eyes were fierce and yellow, his talons were like steel. "Kill," he sang, "I have to kill, blood to drink and flesh to tear." He laughed and his wings flashed in the sun. Go away, Tyler. The air was warm and pleasant as they flew. The gentlest of breezes sped the hawk along and they sighed and murmured after him. Below smiled sleepily green and yellow fields that wore flashing streams like jewels, while stately trees stood nodding by their own cool shadows. The world had never seemed so fair. Still waterlogged and heavy from his long immersion, the father hung from the child's hand and felt his own weight dragging at him. He felt his hands, rusty and crumbling, began to slip away from those that held him. His tight spring ached inside him, and with a great longing for peace and rest came over him. "Why not give up the struggle?" he sighed. "I can hold on no longer." "Don't say that, Papa," cried the child. "I've got you. We won't fall." "We had our hopes, they are gone," said the father listlessly. "Let me drop into some peaceful meadow where the grass will grow among my scattered clockwork. Why wait to be smashed upon some lonely rock where the hawk finds out we aren't edible?" "If we'd been edible, we'd never have lasted this long," said the child. Ahead on the horizon hung the smoke of a burning rubbish. "See below," he said. I took her heading towards the dump. He was silent for a few moments. "Do you remember," he said, "that Muskrat told us we'd have to be taken apart before we could figure out how the hows and what would make us self-winding?" "Yes," said the father, "but Muskrat is gone." "We aren't," said the child. Not yet. Alright, Christy, we'll continue this tomorrow. I feel like it's going so downhill, but I just know something is going to get better. It's just... something will become better, and I just know it. And I bet it has something to do with that vagabond at the beginning. I bet something will happen. In the meantime, though, we'll do a little A&M tomorrow. And in the meantime, sleep well. Keep can, find a llama, carry on. I love you dearly, and I'll be home soon. Sleep well, vegan life. I love you. Good night.